Good afternoon. I'm Ben Lussman with the Grand Water and Sewer Service Agency. I've been asked by members of the Grand Water and Sewer Service Agency Operating Committee to respond to the information or allegations that Grand Water is up to something, as Commissioner Hedin stated in your last meeting. She found it peculiar that we have kept Kens Lake levels up so high over the winter. To GWISA and our customers and shareholders, it is very fortunate that we were able to do so. In fact, that is what a reservoir is intended for, to capture water when available and release it as needed when it may otherwise not be available. Questioning this seems an attempt to discredit the operation of the facility and is very concerning to GWISA that it is being disseminated on record as such. She also referenced that Mark Stilson, the Division of Water Rights, is unsure of the interaction between Kens Lake and the Valleyfield and Glen Canyon group aquifers. While this is true in part, the uncertainty is the volume of the interaction with both aquifers rather than the fact that it exists. This is based on the ongoing groundwater studies monitoring done for San Juan Spanish Valley Special Service District by Cascade Water Resources. I've printed a few copies of well levels in comparison to the levels of Kens Lake from the most recent study for your reference. WISA does not currently have weather monitoring equipment to estimate our evaporative losses, but we are working on getting and installing that equipment to estimate and track the amount of recharge which is occurring. Our statement noting losses was from a time when the lake was partially iced over, with little evaporative loss and no inflow or outflow occurring. Measurements at that time showed around 70 acre-feet of water was lost in that week. WISA is also working at ways to increase the amount of aquifer recharge outside of the leakage from the bottom of Kens Lake to promote sustainable water sources to the entire Grand Valley into the future, as this is our duty. They just asked that I come down and present and have that go on record as a response to that information. Thank you.
Thank you. Did anyone have any questions? Okay, and probably no one online that wants to. No. Okay. Ex parte communication service disclosures. Okay. Approval of the minutes of the last meeting, April 8th, 2024.
I'll second.
And any discussion? All in favor? Aye. And one abstention from Steve. Okay. Trish is up.
Hard act to follow. Just a quick update on the county commission meeting. So as you know, the CUP for the King Creek Improvement District was on the agenda. We made a motion to postpone that decision until May 7th. We had the Rim Tour CUP, and that was voted to unanimously pass that. The final plat for Arroyo Crossing, Tract E, passed unanimously. The road right-of-way width reduction for the Old Thompson passed unanimously. And then we actually had two discussion items at the end of the agenda regarding Thompson. One was the fact that once we pass that, as we move into that replat, there'll be our understanding, and tell me if I'm wrong, that we'll need totally new title reports on all the parcels. So there's definitely going to be some costs associated with the county doing this, and so how can the county basically cover those costs? Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So that was a discussion. I think people are very on board with helping with that. We didn't do a vote, but we straw polled. And then the other one was some assistance with the hydrology study by the TSSD, the Thompson Springs Special Service District. They're obviously working very hard to try to procure more water. And so kind of an initial step in that might to just be a hydrology study. And so they have gathered some money from outside sources, I believe CIB money, but maybe we could chip in on that too, which I think it would be the way to go. Just, is it feasible, right? What are the well logs that exist along that escarpment? How much has that spring? Anyways, just some feasibility studies before they dive into things like drilling wells, which cost a lot.
Trish, wasn't there a study before out there? Or
I know they've done engineering, like Sunrise Engineering, they've done studies, but not, I don't think it's gone beyond just kind of like, what do you guys currently have, right? So I think that'd be great. And I think, again, the commission was very receptive to trying to help with that. What's up? The productive agenda. It's a productive agenda. Yeah, I know when you said, well, maybe we can put it's like, man, the next agenda, I would imagine it's gonna be productive also. Do you guys have any questions for me? Comments?
Okay, and I think we're ready then to open a public hearing on a recommendation for the ordinance approving Tejada ADO amended development agreement.
Great, thank you, Oki. So I'm just putting up here the master plan so we can all kind of remember what was approved. This master plan is not being amended. I apologize because when I originally was corresponding with the applicant, it was right when Jenna had left and I was kind of taking this over, and we thought that because they were making some changes to their site plan, which is a different process, that the master plan needed to be amended, but we'd already figured out that it wasn't going to affect the master plan. So the applicant might have been confused because I told them to put on their public notice signage where they posted on their property that it was an amended master plan and amended PA. But when I went to notice this project, I corrected it. So it is saying, when I went to notice the agenda, I should say, the agenda lists it correctly as a amended development agreement. We're not amending the master plan. So we're just kind of taking that element out of it. It's not that big of a deal because we're not adding anything to the decision. We're kind of just taking something off the table. So does that all make sense? Sorry for the confusion there. Okay. So what we're looking at is, with the ADOs, they, see if I can actually pull this. Sorry. Okay, here we go. So the ADO was approved for this property. This is the property that's out on Highway 191. It's the Sherry Griffith property, or Sherry Griffith Adventures. In August 15, 2023, the ADO was approved. They have been going through some challenges with UDOT in terms of their access, and they also decided that it might be good to actually build a bathhouse instead of installing connections for water and sewer to the sites. So that's what the changes are going to be in the site plan. But that means that the site plan review will take a little bit longer to go through and make sure that they submitted that towards the end of March. So we wouldn't have had enough time to complete that review without going through this process to do a development agreement amendment for the extension of the approval. It's a little tedious administrative kind of stuff, but we have to go through it. So so this extension for site plan approval would give them until February 5th. I'm sorry, that's for the certificate of occupancy. Let's see, the current deadlines for site plan approval and certificate of occupancy is February 15th, 2024, which is passed. And so now we'd be looking at site plan approval of August 15th, 2024, which is very doable. So that's the basic, that's the gist of what this amendment to their development agreement is. We do have in the staff report a bulleted list of items that they are proposing to change in the site plan, which wouldn't necessarily need to be don't need to be reflected on the master plan. The master plan is sort of a conceptual plan that is approved as part of the overlay rezone. So we're just really trying to get a sense of how many units they're proposing. So what the overlay would allow them to do in terms of the number of RV sites, and basically what the existing structures are. So that's what the master plan does. Site plan, it gets into the really the nitty gritty, like where they're gonna put their parking and the other structures that they're proposing. So that's an administrative approval that planning and zoning does. So just to go over those really quickly, separating the rear portion of the property where the ADUs are located by a fence that would provide additional privacy to the dwelling units. Adding a bathhouse to the site as opposed to having ADO residents utilize the company's bathrooms inside the warehouse. Oh, so I had that wrong. I thought they were maybe proposing to have hookups to the sites, but they were originally going to be using the existing structures, bathrooms, which I think they decided was not ideal. And then equipping each site with water and electric and providing an on-site RV dump station. And so those, I could show you here, I'll share with you the site plan. I do think it would be valuable. We don't normally have planning commission look at site plans, but I think it would be valuable in this case since we have it in the agenda packet. To just get your feedback if you want, if you had any ideas. Sorry, Google's making me sign out. Sign back in.
So Lisa, are they going to be using Budweiser Road now instead of the highway?
I believe that is
That's
correct.
what their change is.
Yeah,
It's probably
in
a
order
good
to
idea.
avoid having to go through the highway access permit. And so here is the proposed new site plan. And so one of the things that Mikel had noticed right off the bat is we haven't actually given any feedback on this yet to the applicant. But this dashed line right here is actually the property boundary. And we have had a conversation with them in the past. Bill Jackson pointed out that this building, this existing structure was built in the right of way, which is definitely not ideal, but going forward, we just don't want to have any more of that. And so with these parking spaces proposed here, even though those are not necessarily, they're not structures, but they still should be out here in the right of way. So if this is right of way, or if it's just setback. The parking spaces.
Yes, or what are your structures?
Oh.
Setback from the right of way?
The structures, basically our setbacks are always they're based on the property line. So it doesn't have anything to do with the right of way. It's more about the property line. So
Basically, you can build on a setback. You can
Yeah.
build at the center, up to the edge of the setback.
exactly. Yeah, but if this line is their property boundary or if this is the setback, that's kind of where we were kind of trying to figure out.
I hope it's a setback, otherwise they have a building that's not even on their property.
It's in setback, maybe so. Okay, yeah, I think that's what that dash line actually is.
And you're talking about the setback setback for the property, not for the right of way, right?
Correct, yeah.
Mary, there's your answer about the access.
Yeah. I saw that. I couldn't tell from the map if it was,
I know
if it was on the highway or
Doesn't do
not.
a good job of showing where the existing roads are. There's no location of roads on here, so.
Well, the map that they provided that has the overlay over the top of the map,
Oh, right,
it showed, and I wondered if that's what it was, so I just wanted to make,
there we
to
go.
assure myself that that's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cause that's not wide enough to be the highway.
Yeah, so these parking spaces where the gray over here on the right, the top right corner, you can see my cursor, but those seem like they could be a little bit tight in terms of
Getting in and
people
out.
getting in and out of those parking spaces. So we were gonna probably suggest to the applicants that they need to move those. Parking can't be in the setback, so you just can't have structures in the setback, so.
And they also need one space per unit, and that's only.
Yeah, it's odd that they reduced the number
Yeah.
of parking spaces. I don't know if they were thinking that some of the parking could be included on the actual sites themselves, like within that,
Oh,
that little building pad,
oh,
but.
If it's wide
the
enough.
Original plan had, like 9
mhm.
parking spaces, and now it's down to 5, so. So, yeah, these are things.
All that walking.
Well, I would wonder too, say on that, the previous slide, it said for RV spaces, 5 through 9, I think, or whatever it was. And just looking at those images, I'm wondering if they're anticipating some being RVs, right? So you have an accompanying vehicle, and then the others are more like van life. So they would be, like, that is the spot.
But the parking spaces here, I believe those are intended only to be for the people who live in these RV sites to have their vehicle parked.
Right,
they're-
and what I'm saying is maybe the reduction that we're seeing here is because the other ones are, they're.
I see what
vehicle-
you're saying. They're coming and going with
Yeah,
the
like
actual.
that's the one vehicle, or
Yeah.
dirt bike in front.
That's a very good possibility. I don't believe we had. We don't have specific parking requirements for the ADO, except that. They would just need to be able to accommodate any parking within the sites that the envelope of each site. So. That was kind of left to be pretty flexible.
But doesn't the site plan require that they have one parking space per unit? No, it doesn't. I thought I read that somewhere. That has to be a parking space per unit.
Well, I think what it is it needs to be not necessarily. Like outside of the sites, but that the
Oh, I
site
see.
envelope
Yes.
itself needed to accommodate a parking space, a parking area for their.
And that'll wash out when you get the actual site plans. So you
Right.
see that, yeah.
And Lisa, I think there was only one shower in their plan. And there was 3. Are there 3 showers? I thought there was, are there showers in each of the
It
bathrooms
looked like,
also?
that's what it looked like when I saw it.
Okay. Building they added, it's 2 unisex bath and shower. Okay. 88. Good, that makes more sense.
Yeah, because that's the state code for sanitation requires so many that would have to wash out also during summer.
Okay, so back to the amended development agreement, as I said, this just gives the applicant the extra 6 months to get through the site plan approval, so we don't have a problem of running up against that ADO expiration. And so that would be your recommendation to the county commission on this item.
And is the applicant around or online?
Now, I don't see.
Okay, then I'm gonna close this public hearing, and I guess the next thing we want to do is think about a motion and then a discussion. I'd like to make a motion to adopt the ordinance approving the amended development agreement and master plan for the ADO development located at 2231 South Highway.
allowing for a 6-month extension of site plan approval and certificate of occupancy deadline. Condition upon the owner reporting the amended development agreement and real property records in Bryan County simultaneously with this ordinance prior to issuance of the site.
Second.
Do we have any discussion?
Question, but I can't remember what it was. Hold on, give me a minute. Oh, I know what it was. Why is this extension? Is it a part of the process that they've already applied for it? This extension was something that the code allowed for them to do?
Yes, so
So
it's
that's how it
similar to
works.
the HTHO. They, that overlay, once you had it approved as the rezone,
Mhm.
it came with the development agreement, master plan. And if you didn't get it was the subdivision or something approved at a certain, after 2 years of that,
Mhm.
then you had to apply for an extension.
Yeah,
So
there's
that's
something in the code. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. And does the site plan, is the site plan going to be a part of the master plan? Does the master plan need to be amended too? So you
Master
can take
plan-
that out of the motion?
wouldn't need to be, is it in the motion? Oh, I'm sorry. I see it is in there. We should remove that from the motion. Yep, that's my bad.
I guess,
Sorry.
do we need to approve the master plan apparently not, right?
No, in their materials, they don't actually have an amended master plan per se. The site plan is there, but that doesn't constitute necessarily, it's almost the same thing, but it's not titled master plan, so I don't think we could count it as an amended master plan.
Need to read,
I would just say maybe to amend the motion to
strike the master.
strike.
Okay. Then I'd like to amend the motion to strike the master plan from the record.
I'll second that.
Any discussion on the amendment? How many are in favor of the amendment? It's unanimous. Any more discussion of the original motion or of the amended motion? Okay, I guess we're ready to vote. How many are in favor of the amended motion? That's unanimous.
Okay, so I put the first part of this into the packet for the agenda summary, but I did leave out by accident. There's a whole nother set of standards here that go with the 3.3.2 section in the land use code. So I wanted to just make sure we captured that. Essentially, right now, you can, if you have a commercial use on your property, as being the principal use on the property, so you really have, this has to be on or within a property that's zoned commercial. You are allowed to apply for employee housing, which essentially is up to 5 RV sites. And right now, the language says here, up to 5 RV sites to the otherwise allowed non-residential principal use. So this number 5 or quantity of 5 is related to a commercial principal use. And we've had, going on for probably a couple of years now, debates in the department and with property owners, whether or not that means you can have more than 5 sites if you have 2 commercial uses on your property or 2 or 3 commercial uses, because in the county, it's not necessarily something you would find probably in a lot of city parcels, but in the county, we have a lot very larger parcels that are sometimes 2 to 5 acres, and they'll have, you know, multiple commercial uses that are permitted.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
So one parcel could have, part of it could be highway commercials, part of it general business, part of it the other commercial.
True, that could be the case. Like, we do have those split zones along the South Highway 191 where it's highway commercial and general business. So, but I mean, even if you just had highway commercial, there are examples where multiple commercial uses are permitted on one parcel. Like, for example, I'll give you a good example. This is one that we've been grappling with. Where the Taco Time is, that has there was an existing like automotive repair shop in the back. They've since, I think, have been looking at doing something different for that building. There was the coffee drive-through there. And then recently, since our time in the planning department, we permitted the Taco Time food truck or structure, as we call it. And so there's 3 different commercial uses. They're really distinct, right? It's an auto repair, a drive-through restaurant, and then, well, I guess the drive-through coffee shop is similar with restaurant use, but we categorize those as different commercial uses, and we allow that. I guess in another conversation could be, should we allow multiple commercial uses on one property, or should we be asking that property owner to like subdivide? Like, I think when you think of like I hate the idea of strip malls, but when you think of buildings like that where there's multiple commercial uses in one building, they tend to be divided in condominiumized, like a condominium commercial kind of units. So I think maybe that's another conversation, but to get back to this, like if that property came to us, if that property owner came to us and said, okay, by your definition, we have 3 commercial uses on this parcel, but we have 15 RV sites for employees. And I think it would be difficult to, it would be difficult to argue against. I also wonder, if the property was smaller, or if it was in a location that was right up against some other neighborhood or something, maybe there would be a conflict there. But yeah, it's definitely something we struggled with. So,
And I do think if you changed it, I mean, if you were to allow it, it would seem like size would have to be in there.
right, exactly. So that's been kind of where we've been headed with this, is that maybe the language needs to be revised in order to tie the number of RV sites to the size of the parcel versus the commercial use.
Well, and you're also going to have every business is going to essentially have their own little spot that they're renting. So those 5 spaces would end up on just their section.
Right.
And the places that they've got, I mean, those businesses right now, I don't think they have 5 employees. Because those spaces have to be used for employees.
That's true. That is true.
What I see is that it's kind of like a pre-ADO thing, right? So it's like, look at the Tejada or the Sherry Griffith place. Like, let's say they were like, they by use could have 5 spots, not have to build a bathhouse or anything.
Oh, no, they have to be able to put it back now. So that's part of this.
So on that, I thought they did have to build a bathhouse. I thought it was just an RV spot.
It says right here, each space shall be served by public water and sewer.
That doesn't say a bathhouse.
Well, so the
Or
way we've
bathhouse.
interpreted that, we've interpreted it somewhat liberally to mean that each space shall be served. So essentially, if you need to provide either a bathhouse that can serve that many spaces, or each one has to have its own individual.
And that's a sanitation.
Number 8.
Right. So I'm just saying, like,
Oh, yeah, there we go.
take a place like, it's just like that, the Sherry Griffith place, they could just split it in 2 or have 2 different businesses, all something they could have 10. So like, I'm almost, like, what I was thinking about this whole thing was, do we just kind of scrap this? Put more of an ADO style thing on there anyways, instead of just trying to mess with this, it's like, well, we already have this framework. Kind of like frozen that ADO, do we kind of be like, well, this is a thing that can go on commercial real estate anyways, kind of revise it that way. Instead of trying to like tinker with this when it's like, well, we have an ADO that has almost like more standards on it. I don't know, that was good.
No, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that.
Actually,
It's very similar.
something I was thinking about since we're doing a revision to the land use code, if you don't have anybody in the waiting for this to happen, I would guess that the firm that's going to be rewriting the code will consolidate all of these RV sections to make it fit so that you don't have all this non-conforming uses going on out there. Once that happens, you know how non-conforming uses go. So if this isn't like the most important thing in the world right now, I'd hold off and wait and see if we can get, once I don't know, when do you plan on the new guy coming in for rewrite of the code?
Oh, I mean, that's been a conversation for sure in terms of, the amount of land use code updates that we have been tracking, and to the point now where it will almost be, or could very well be, a complete overhaul.
Yeah,
And we
I'm
won't be able to
sure
do
they're
that
probably-
in-house, so it's already been something that's I put on the radar for, making a budget amendment to be able to contract that out.
Oh, I thought it was already.
No, the land use plan for the general plan, the
Oh.
land use chapter for the general plan is what we contracted with a consultant for right now to finalize that. And, ideally in planning sense, you would get done with your general plan
Mhm.
stuff, and that would inform, and you would move to the land use code amendments based on all of those recommendations that are in the general plan. But we are in this period right now where the commission has approved that 180-day period to do some land use code amendments that they deemed are urgent. And so there might need to be some updates in the interim before we do the major overhaul. Yeah. So I guess this could be one of those. It could be that we just do kind of something like, maybe we flag this for a consolidated RV section or alternative dwelling section someday when we do the overhaul. But maybe for now, as like a stopgap measure, we could modify it just to clarify, so that we aren't interpreting this as being wildly permissive for RV sites. I don't know. Could be a thing to consider.
I mean, the way it stands, you could have an acre and 4 businesses and put 20 units on it. Am I correct, basically?
If you had, 4 commercial uses and enough space, it would definitely have to be considering the building coverage max, that there's a percentage of building coverage max.
It's 800, looks like at least 800 square feet per trailer space, right? So that may be the limiting factor.
Right.
Depending on what else is.
Well, each residential principal use is only allowed 5 RV sites.
Non-residential principal use.
Yeah.
But there's really no limit to the number of principal uses on a commercial property.
That's where we determined that's where you get into having multiple.
But there's limited areas out there that have that kind of acreage, right? Most of them have, I'm thinking even of the newer ones, they're so small, you couldn't even put one RV site on them because they're that small. They're usually and they would take up their parking and all the things that are required. So under those circumstances, that's, what you'd look at site plans. That's what staff would do in site plans. So a lot of the RV sites would kind of wash out at that point.
Yeah, I think mostly we'd be looking at areas along the highway here, like, for example, this area with these larger lots, this is like an almost 2 acre lot, but mostly general business, tiny bit of. This is almost 3 acres here. So there are some larger areas. This is over 6 acres.
Are there anything, do they already have businesses on them?
I think most of these are just one.
Oh, they're done.
A lot of these are one, but I mean, I guess we were thinking ahead in terms
Mhm.
of, if we get a proposal for multiple businesses, like, for example, if somebody wanted to come in with a business park type of use, and there were multiple different commercial uses within that, would you consider that? By definition,
So would that be where you'd want to go? Do you want to define it in the definition?
I think it should be better defined.
In the definition. That was something else I was looking at. I was looking for a definition in the land use code for, and it wasn't in there. Alternative dwelling. There's
No,
not
it's
an alternative dwelling.
Mary. We are so backlogged on updating the definition section. That would actually be one that I think we could do. Like within this period of time that we have,
Mm.
kind of focusing on some urgent updates. It's very much needed. There's so many things that we've updated in the land use code that didn't get updated in the definitions.
And the current code in the land use code uses the word dwelling all the way through that. And a dwelling is not an alternative dwelling. A dwelling has its own definition, which is
Yeah.
odd.
Very true.
It was confusing when I was reading. I wasn't around when the ADO went in.
I know.
I had to go over the whole thing. So
I would just share a concern I have about interpreting this as if any business on a lot, on a commercial lot, can have 5, so meaning 10, 15, 20 per lot. This is probably unpopular. I feel like that allowing that would be a little short-sighted potentially, because I think we do need to preserve our commercial space. Because,
Right.
I think we need to allow for upward mobility, and if we reduce all that commercial space to, house folks in jobs that maybe don't have upward mobility, now we've just really we've done a little too much pruning.
Right.
But on the same token, if there is, a project that comes on board that says, well, we want to bring this company here and we would like to put some housing in the back and maybe there's 2 businesses.
Right. I know
I don't know what the right answer is, but I do, that's the thought of reducing, the commercial envelope is what's been going through my head here. Seeing as I applied for this on economic diversification,
Right.
that's the stance
think
I'll
it's-
take on that. 'Cause I think we do have more housing options coming on board. I know we're still, we're not where we want to be. That's why I say it may be short-sighted where that's getting built up. Let's not limit, we need jobs.
Yeah, for sure.
and I also think the ADOs, are they filled? Are the 150 units filled?
No,
Oh, because that obviously would take exactly what the 15 or the 5 units per resident commercial use. That's where it would come in. And actually reading the ADU and understanding what this RV sites for commercial, it kind of coincided a lot. I mean, there's a lot of the same stuff.
very.
And the state sanitarian requires that those all have bathhouses or water and sewer to the sites. So, and they require 2, a female and a male, or unisex, whatever they want to call them. But that state code requires that. So, all those factors with how much would that be on a lot? That would be a lot to even consider. So anyway, just a thought when I was going through it. Like I said, I was so unfamiliar with the ADO that it took me a while to understand it.
Yeah, when they do an ADO, they pay the impact fee. When they do this, are they paying the
Yes.
sewer?
They would be, they should be, yes, that they would have to.
Anytime they have water and sewer.
Well, are they hooking up to water and sewer? They just-
Same thing, same thing.
They would have to go through a site plan review, which would have to sign off on that, so they would have to be going through the impact fee process. The other thing is, I think it has been a very difficult situation for code enforcement, like to actually follow up with that requirement that the RV sites or that the employees that are living there are actually working for the business that's on that parcel.
I wondered about that.
That's a pretty hard thing to track in terms of enforcement. So and we've kind of gone back and forth to wonder, is it really that critical? I mean, they're providing employee housing. That's a good thing. We all want that. Do they need to be required to work for that property?
You know-
Employees that's on that property, or is that,
Well, with the ADOs that's in place.
Yeah.
This almost could be omitted. You could just take it out of the code. There's nobody's using it anyway. They all went with the ADO instead.
right?
So it might be just something to admit, to get omitted and not worry about it anymore, because then you don't have that concern.
Interesting. Well, that's definitely something to consider, is just to, I mean, that would probably be the cleanest way, is to consolidate this with the ADO, but then we have the discussion of whether, or what that looks like for opening up that ADO program and how we want to go about that. So that has some need for, it needs some revised, some revisions in terms of the processing of it, and there's some other things that we flagged in the past. So it wouldn't be necessarily a quick fix, but
How many sites are there that are using this point?
I would say most of the people, they have useful space on their parcel. Way out at Swiss River Ranch, they do have space for that. They have multiple options. So they would have. That's a good example. They put in 5 spaces for everyone to use. Operation.
But Sorrel River has employee housing on site. And it's part of their PUD, so they have to keep those employee housing. Yeah. More.
They want to.
That seems reasonable to me.
right,
That's a space where
that
that's,
would be an appropriate.
yeah.
Yeah, I guess. The question is that this language that we have currently, is it sufficient to deal with that kind of scale? Of employee housing, maybe we should be just really pushing towards getting this all consolidated on ADO and having like a specific. Like, under the ADO, like if you're a commercial, you have a commercial use on your parcel or multiple commercial uses. Here's your options for. Alternative dwellings that would house your employees. It could be treated slightly different.
With this section here, the land use code, so would this be an administrative process for approval?
Just
So I'm in
requires-
favor of keeping it more on that side rather than the ADO,
Okay.
because I don't, just having observed, I think I've seen some rationales where I'm like, what that, I think I I err more on the side of administrative because it's black and white and you don't get into
Right.
politics and,
Whereas the
buddy,
ADO
buddy,
requires
which
a
happens.
legislative
But it-
decision, it
Maybe
requires
we
the
could
public
tie the
hearings.
density more to what the ADO allowed, so it's not like, oh, I got an acre, well, we'll make the bathroom another business, and then you get 20 businesses, so. I mean, it sounds like that kind of needs to be fleshed out, so I'm like, what's our standard for that? Maybe that density, what the ADO has is like a good standard of density.
I mean, well, we didn't have a density cap. We only limited the amount of RV sites or ADO sites that they could fit on the property. With the building max coverage
Right, that's what I'm saying,
percentage, yeah.
Use that to tie it up.
So I'm gonna go and look at, I have a feeling there might be something to do with there not being much of a building max coverage for commercial uses. And that's where we would run into that, where it could just be a moot point.
Well, the commercial businesses also have to require, they're required parking, drainages and all the things that will fill up their
Yes,
lot.
it does fill it up.
Yeah, and the larger lots, you're right, they're not gonna have that, but they're still gonna, once they start putting in the extra RV sites and bathhouse or whatever they're going to put in, then that also will fill up their site. And then that will also require more parking.
No,
So
you're right.
there's many
for sure.
things that go into it.
Yeah, there is no building max coverage for commercial. I've seen here.
Well, they have
Yeah.
setbacks. They have setbacks. Commercial sites have setbacks, right?
Yeah, there's setbacks, but you don't have you can just build up to the
Setback.
amount of, you can use up the lot with your parking, your structures, circulation. You don't have any limitation on how much of the lot you can use for all of that, so.
But there is in the RV site here, it does say employed by the principal commercial use of the parcel. So you're still gonna have to find out what that principal use is. And if they have 5 different principal uses, then you get 15 units, but they're all gonna have to be specific to the site of that parking area in that site plan.
Yeah, I
Those
would
were
think
things,
so.
yeah.
That should be probably spelled out better if we were gonna look at it like that, because I know we've had a proposal recently where it didn't do that. They were a bunch of different commercial principal uses, but the RV sites were all just lined up, like all consolidated in one area of the lot.
I think it should go to the principal commercial. Each principal commercial use would then have to have their own only 5.
In like some kind of a building.
I would guess it that way, because that way if they're, depending on, and what happens if the commercial use changes use, and we see that happen a lot too in this county. You have a business opening up and then 2 years down the road, it changes to a different business. It might require more parking.
It's always wonderful how complicated it is. The other thing I'm thinking of in the back of my mind is the ADO, really, we don't have many more that we're allowed to because of the cap. But this thing doesn't have a cap,
There's no cap.
so, it's,
Right.
all gotta be negotiated.
So one thing I think we could consider is if we wanted to like kind of work backwards, is should we be thinking about what would be kind of an acceptable or reasonable max for RV sites, no matter the parcel size? Like employee housing RV sites in commercial zoning, should we be thinking like maybe 15? If you were, even if it was tied to like a larger parcel size. That's kind of where my mind was going, is thinking about where we'd want to cap that.
I think it should be capped at employees. Right, that's one of the things it says right here is limited exclusively to each employee. Two employees who are employed by the principal structure. So that's where you're capping it. You're capping it
Right,
to the
but see
employees.
that, we've struggled with enforcing that, like that. I was hoping that we could actually not have that requirement anymore, because it's so hard to enforce, and it feels a little disingenuous to say
Yeah,
that
you're looking at your neighbor. Lots of complaints. I could see that.
yeah.
On a commercial property, could a landowner prospectively add these through some other process, add a bunch of sites? is that
Well, the,
through the ADO process.
the ADO process, but that would be. Yes, they probably could, but that's a legislative decision. So I think that at that point, the planning commission and the commission would be looking at that site and saying, oh, well, there's already this amount of RV sites for free housing. Do we want to add more? Does it make sense? Or,
I'm thinking about like Surratt, right, where they're kind of remote, you really would rather not have people drive back.
yes, right, which I agree with.
So at that point, if we limited this to 15, we would be forcing them to go away from the administrative process at that point. They would still have the opportunity to do it.
I wonder if we could say something like for those properties that are located outside of, this vicinity of, our valley or public services or something like that, that they could be considered to have more sites.
That kind of makes it a little more complex too. I guess that, are we having any issues with this? Because I think physically these, if you're looking at 2 or 3 acre sites, there's gonna be a limited number of employees on those anyway. So are we trying to solve a problem we don't have?
I was just thinking the same thing. It's like, how many times a year does this pop up?
Well, I would say we have a few instances right now that we are struggling to, well, one of the applications is pretty, it's old, and so it's not necessarily an active application, but it is very likely to come back around. And that would be one of those where they would be proposing pretty much the same thing as Sorel, is like a full RV site or RV campground for their employees based on the multiple commercial uses that they're.
Well, Sorrel could probably go through their PUD and change it that way, rather than they could do whatever they wanted in there once that happened. But the ADO, and then this section here where the RV sites are specific to the principal commercial. One of the things that I struggled with when we were going through, when I was first looking at the ADO, when when I got this opened, the ADO actually allows them to use those sites for anybody.
Exactly.
This section here is specific to employees on site.
Right.
So I'm wondering if that's why ADO was the format that people used rather than using this. I mean,
Oh,
And residential, maybe I was filed for residential as well.
right.
Just-
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, that's why, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, that's, under the circumstances, I wondered if that's why ADO was going. They were using that rather than this, because these were specific to employees on site, not other employees.
Right. Yeah, I wonder that too, for those that are located in commercial zoning, that could have otherwise have gone through the employee or accessory employee housing, but they would have been maxed out if they had one, like the shared river property. It's
Yeah.
one commercial use, so they would have been maxed out at 5.
Do we just say it's like 5 per acre? Would that be?
I like that you brought that up, because I didn't want to say a number, but I think we need to start having maybe that discussion. Per parcel.
Yeah, it's cut and dry that way. I don't know, then it's like, it seems like that solves the problem. So what's our density? What are we willing to have density on these kind of places? One of the things I think of too is like, Steve, you brought up some good points, but there's one thing you were saying about like, doesn't lock in this commercial space, like when you build something, it's hard to unbuild it. And there's part of me that's like, well, like a sewer hookup and water hookup and electric is pretty minimal. So if you really wanted to develop it, yeah, I mean, from what I see, each one of these spots costs like $5,000 to make. I've seen ADO, but it is, it is something.
I like that idea of 5 units an acre, and then you just basically just throw that in there, whatever I can't see anything. Or however you're interpreting it, per principal, max 5 for employees per principal, but shall not exceed 5 units per acre. To me, that keeps it pretty clean, and I agree with what you're saying. As I was been thinking about it more, I'm like, I don't. I mean, it's probably honestly such a non-issue most of the time. I don't think it's going to impact greatly, or reduce greatly the available commercial space. And then that could keep it administrative, clean cut, dry, black and white, apply, pass, fail. Everybody's in,
And if it's,
or not.
if it's 1.9 acres to the property.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing.
So
And
it's
you're gonna have to go back
Oh.
and you have to rewrite that section.
We round up.
You got a half an acre, you only get 2.5.
1 unit per 0.2
Yeah,
acres. You know, I
Then
think
you can
it's
apply for a
a-
variance, and then it's legislative.
I think
Variances
it's
aren't a good
thing,
idea.
But I know like Sherry Griffith is a good example. I guarantee they have employees that are
I
using
do too.
this and it's definitely relieves some of the burden on the county.
That's what this was written for, was specifically for guide services, because they were the ones that had those kind of people.
Yeah,
And where they weren't permanent, they were seasonal. And that's what that was written for, was to help them out.
yeah.
We had a
and
big
it helps
public hearing
retain employees, it helps employees as well. So I think there's definite benefits.
Yeah, and I guess when you think about the guide businesses and like not to pick on one in particular, but just to provide an example of what you're saying, Mary, is like one of the key projects or properties, guide services that instigated the ADO conversation and creating that was the Navtech property. And that one, I believe, is only an acre, 1 acre. And so under this employee accessory housing, which we offered for them to do that, but it wouldn't have,
They're gonna have a principal structure.
they didn't have that. It's an offsite. It doesn't have a business on it. Plus, they were looking to get like probably 15 or so. And so,
Did NAPTEC use it? Have they?
well, we haven't, they did get approved for their ADO, but they haven't submitted a site plan, which is a little problematic. We've been working to communicate and encourage them to do that, but haven't received it yet. So, but I guess like if they, if we had, being that we have that ADO program available, that would be like the next level. If you couldn't get your employee housing on your on site, then I guess the next thing would be to go through the legislative process to apply for an
That
ADO.
makes good sense.
So, yeah. But I don't know, I was just thinking of some of these other areas of, like, on the Sorrel Ranch, that's five units per 1 acre. And that's not something that anybody would feel concerned about in that area in terms of the amount of RV sites that would be allowed. Just checking. Yes, I fully agree.
Yeah, how does that work if like a trip, like it's only commercial, does it cover any ranging, grazing or mining activities too, or is that's separate?
They densified it in some areas. I think that's what Red Cliffs did. And they have land that's across the river and stuff. So they kind of combine, put all the houses in some places and have some.
It was their, Sorrel and Red Cliff were both planned unit developments.
But they
'Cause they're-
don't have commercial zone. Nope.
They're Yeah, they are. Well, when they first started, we didn't have any of that. So they went in as, and it was just grazing. It was just that's the zone was G. And so they went in with that PUD and then that's where I think the development agreements really started coming into play. Because their whole, if you go into the recorder's office, they've got, their final site plan has like 5 pieces of Mylar. Most of it's words that tell you how much can go on their property, period, and that's it. That's all they could do. Those took months to get passed. They weren't easy. And then we had a master plan go through and then a new amendments to the code, so a lot of things changed after that.
Yeah, I would have to go back and look at all of that to understand how they were able to do the commercial uses in range and grazing. And make sure that, otherwise, the way we've been always interpreted this section is that we would apply it to commercial zone properties.
How is that
Like-
defined?
But I mean, if you had a non-residential principal use, I don't think that's just in our interpretation, that's not allowed in a residential zone unless you go through this special, whatever they went through, their PUD.
Are they, but are, now they must be resorts special. Did they change the zoning on it eventually?
There's a whole section in the code now called the Dude Ranch, and they have to follow everything in that. And that's where and that happened kind of simultaneously with what was going on there.
So I am just looking at the land use code right now in the base zoning district section. And that little grid that has everything like small lot residential, large lot residential. So under residential zoning districts, range and grazing is included in that. The non-residential zoning districts, it's got a lot of commercial, neighborhood, highway, resort. But then there is general business, light industrial, heavy industrial. Are those all being defined as commercial? Or would they in the section we've been talking about?
Talking about
It's non-residential principal use.
all the peak areas.
Yes,
Land use
yep.
table, yeah, those are all commercial.
Okay, great.
Anything that's pink, non-residential is commercial. So. There you go. Yeah, so they are still zone range and grazing, so like I said, this is one of those things that will go down the rabbit hole and like
Yeah. don't-
figure out what was approved back in the day. How they're operating with commercial uses out there with range and grazing zoning. Obviously it was approved, so. But then we'll have to look at that in relation to the applicability of the section 3.3.2. Because normally, I know we've had this conversation in the past where it was like somebody had a home occupation or something, and they were like, "Can we get RV employee housing in our rural residential zone?" And he said, no. But you're not gonna have that. Generally, you're not gonna have a non-residential principal use in a residential zone. This is kind of an outlier because they got their special approvals. Okay, so I think we could start with this idea of looking at breaking down the number of RV sites per like one site per like, what did you say, 0.2 acres or something like that, and see how that plays out.
And then whatever language it said, that you have to have 0.2 acres. It's
Right, yeah, that makes sense. What about, do we still want to attempt to require these sites be occupied by employees who are working for the commercial use on the property, or do we care? Do we?
Here's the problem you have when you don't do it that way, is suddenly you're doing quasi RV park. So
Yeah,
why would anybody go through the RV park section?
right.
So you don't want to get too
Yeah,
late.
no, you're right, Mary. I think that it's still, we should still have it as a requirement. I think the tricky thing is, like I said, enforcements. We'll just have to find a way to better enforce or just be more sort of be able to track these a little bit better.
I know they're crazy.
Trish has a comment.
Did they have to, or any of you update their business license? Is it?
It's annually, and
So I'm just
what's-
wondering, and it's on that,
what's interesting is in the past, it's been automatic renewal, like. And then they have to still pay the $100 fee, so they are involved in the process. But they never, the renewals have never gone through our office for a check-in. So that is changing now. We're going to start requiring that P and Z gets to see every business license is getting renewed so that we can kind of do a check-in, see if it's actually compliant with code. And
so it seems like that could just be an easy part of that process, that they just did your user, like your.
that's a,
They're occupying.
that's a great idea.
I mean, understandably, they might do some fishy stuff in between, but at least once a year, there's some. Rush.
That's a great idea.
I don't know. Yeah.
Naming the employees might be difficult when the license is renewed for a seasonal operation.
I understand.
But I think you're right in the fact that the business license could include a number of accessory housing sites. That adds a level of complexity again to licensing, right?
But at least once a year, like I said, I understand, but once a year, it's just like, oh, here's my sites, here's who's occupying it at that given time, at least there's some.
Yeah, I mean, it could even be something we have a checkbox for a field on the business license application. To say, do you have accessory employee housing as permitted?
Yeah. And then other cells.
Yeah, I think that's good. I like that.
Well, does the ADO have a section I thought I read where they're reviewed on a semi-annual? Are they reviewed?
I don't know that they are.
I thought I read something
My
about that.
understanding is we did make something where they had to like.
And when I read,
They had to bring it.
Oh,
Kind of.
I think it was up to our discretion if the planning department would, needed to check in on something to do with the I thought that we had something in there to kind of ensure that the sites were being used for local workers. Yeah.
oh, here it is. It says the tri-annual review every 4 months, consideration of an ADU applications by the planning commission shall be consolidated into one, oh, that's.
Oh,
that
that's just
section.
like for the process. yeah,
Section.
for-
There, I thought I read something in there about that too, but and if that were the case, would that be just simple to put into this section here for RV sites on commercial sites that they would have some kind of an annual review?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we could add that into the language of the accessory employee housing section and then just use the business license renewal process to implement that review. We do have in the ADO section under enforcement, for investigation, it says the county's right to investigate a violation or alleged violation shall include the right to inspect the agreement between owner and tenant or employer evidencing the term of occupancy required in 4.9.4. Oh, and that's because we decided that the base requirement for occupancy would be no shorter than 60 days. And we were thinking that would be at least accommodate seasonal workers, but not restrict seasonal workers. And that it would hopefully deter folks from using those sites for just kind of for visitation.
Overnight rentals.
Just looking at that, the wording in there, it looks like there's a right to investigate a violation or alleged violation. But another way to handle that would be some kind of a recurring inspection. Say that in there, but I think the county should have the right to do that. It seems from an enforcement standpoint, it would be a lot easier for whoever does the enforcement to set up a meeting with the owner on a regular basis, go in and do an inspection and verify with the owner that everything, or the holder of the license, that
Right.
each of those people is employed. The owner should be able to give documentation to show that.
Right.
It's a lot better to do that up front than it is to go and have to go and investigate violations.
I agree. I think this, we struggled with the enforcement section or enforcement language for the ADO, and I remember there was a lot of debate, and conversation about how to set that up, and ultimately, I feel like in the end, reflecting on it, I think that there was room for improvement, yeah.
I think there is right in that section there. Yeah, it should make life a lot easier, and it should give the business license holder the expectation up front there that they're gonna have to demonstrate compliance. Really, that's what you wanna do, is have the business license holder demonstrate compliance on some regular basis.
That would be something we wanna focus on for revisions to the ADO. Bring this back.
Or even for this.
So yeah, for this too.
Add just another bullet in there that says demonstrated compliance or something. Demonstration of compliance.
Yep.
If you just ran the numbers on a 1 acre lot with these minimum allowances of 800 square feet or whatever we said it is per lot or per
Per site.
parking space. If you just ran the maximums, would it even be possible with 2 or 3 businesses to overwhelm an acre?
That is something to look at. Off the top of my head, I don't know. I'd have to kind of do the math and see. It's probably model. 43,560 is an acre.
43,000.
43,500.
Yeah.
Per acre. Like that. Per acre, see.
Yeah, sure.
But that's, you're having space for
They have
business.
a business,
Yes, business. Parking.
Anyway, parking for the business, yeah, all that stuff takes up space.
They sure crammed a lot of houses.
North of 5 acres.
They look a lot smaller.
They do on that.
Yeah, we could look at that and see if we can see realistic.
I think the demonstrated compliance would go over a lot better too.
So I'm just gonna make some quick notes to recap.
So I was gonna be real snarky and say, that's all we said, but it may be all the ideas getting condensed down. So I mean,
No, that's not snarky at all. I think it's very
oh, but it
accurate.
would have been, is that what we said?
I think it is.
Amazing amount of effort to get to that.
There might be some other items, but I'll bring them back. Okay, anybody else have anything to add on this? Topic? Yes, thank you. This is some good direction.
So I guess we have the citizens to be heard. It actually is about 6 o'clock. I'm guessing no one's there. No one's there. Future considerations. I do have one, which is, I guess since Makeda did send me a letter of resignation, you need to fill her position, however that's done, start that
Yes.
process.
Yes, absolutely. We'll get some ads in the papers and up on social media and start advertising for that vacancy right away. And then I think Helen and I were talking about maybe looking at the interview questions again and kind of recalibrating, like, should we add some questions or just think about, recruiting a good qualified planning commissioner for this role. Because I think we're on a roll with our current group and we could just go up from here. I think Makeda, it will be sorely missed for sure. I really enjoyed working with her and her perspectives were always very good and valuable. So, Ms. Makeda.
Absolutely, and I'd say 2 months ago, she contacted me and said, should I resign? I don't think I'm gonna be able to make meetings, and I said, well, I would say just stay. I mean, you're a valued member, stay, and then when you can't attend, then tell us you can't attend, and I think that she's come to that point.
Right.
basically.
Yeah, it happens, life happens. But yes, we will start advertising for that. Then we can maybe have on the next agenda, the interview questions and kind of go over those, make sure that we have a good set of questions. In terms of items that we could add for the next meeting, I think that the landscaping ordinance will have already workshopped that with the commission by that time, so we should be able to have a discussion on that, kind of update you on where the direction that it went after the workshop with the commission. And then possibly I know the land use code priorities has been one of those that I've been wanting to get on the agenda as well to discuss, so we can shoot for that. Does anybody else have any to add to the agenda?
Yes, we're looking for a motion to adjourn. Steve makes a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Yes.